C.L.R. James, which was published in 1996. So the graph will speak for about 15 minutes, and I think because of the time and the technical glitches and so on, that it might be better if we kind of reformat what I had said earlier. But then we allow Anna to give her own reflections on the film, and rather than the three of us sitting here and chatting, that we open it up to a wider engagement. Since you called it meditation, the film was actually a bit longer than I thought it was. Okay, so please help me welcome Africana.
Good evening, sorry, we have to be so late. I'll try to make it easier. I'm very glad to see Anna. It's been 25 years, and it's a very long time. And like Anna, I made a decision in October 2003 that I would start with James. I just completely retired from the James business, so I feel slightly like Al Pacino. More you try to get out, the more you put it back in. And watching the documentary 1.5 times now, I sort of had horrible flashbacks because this is a hagiography, and I sort of, there's part of me that must have nothing to do with it because so much of James' legacy was poured out in sectarian violence, physical kind of people struggling all the way, and people making claims upon him. And it seems to me that James was always in one way or another a victim of that. But by the same token, I am grateful for an opportunity to think about James in that way. So rather than reflect on the hagiography/documentary, I'm going to offer a reflection on perhaps one of my favorite James books, World Revolution. This is called Socialism Without Tears. And I'm going to start with a quote from Heidegger. The masters always have an indelible and therefore deeper knowledge of their roots than their disciples can ever achieve. And this is in no subtle way kind of comment on the documentary. This is me. A single word will have to suffice by way of thinking C.L.R. James' World Revolution, 1917 to 1936. The rise and fall of communism international. A German word, no less. A German word appropriately. We might say, after all, two German thinkers, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who together with their two preeminent Russian heirs, Lenin and Trotsky, are the main subjects of World Revolution. The German word is Eigensinn, a term, a key concept in the work of the German polymath, lawyer, novelist, actor, artist, curator, Alexander Kluge. Writing about Kluge's future sense, Leslie Abelson, who teaches in German, meditates on Kluge's abiding relationship with Eigensinn. It is, Abelson insists, and I quote, a core concept of Kluge's multimedia world, including his many theoretical collaborations with Marxist sociologist Oscar Neff, situated at the crossroads of sensibility, with sim denoting a kind of sense, rather than meaning in the sense, in this case, and intelligibility. This compound noun is notoriously difficult to translate. The translators of Neff includes magnum opus, history of obstinacy, art for obstinacy, which accurately connotes a mixture of concentrated affect, intractable will, stubborn mind, and political resistance, stemming from some indeterminate but determined thing within or one's own, eigen. The adjective eigen can also mean peculiar, though. In this instance, the critical dialectical notions of non-identity attached and Eigensinn can alternately resonate with something akin to either Kantian or Marxian autonomy. Eigensinn, a mixture of intractable will, stubborn mind, and political resistance, stemming from some indeterminate but determined thing within one's own. If Marx, Engels, Trotsky, and Lenin are the four pillars of the World Revolution, then the determined thing within that motivates this Jamesian work can, without doubt, be assigned two names. Joseph Stalin, 1, and 2, the failure of the Third International. more epigrammatically known as the Comintern. The failure of the Third International to live up to its own Marxist promise or promises. Above all else, the Third International was to, quoting James here, to ceaselessly struggle against nationalism in all its forms, patiently pointing out the national sections of the working class movement, the international unity of the proletariat, and the suicidal folly of sectional conflict. Lenin and Trotsky, who, more than any other men, were responsible for the formation of the Third International, who laid down its guiding principles and shaped the policies of its early years, taught that until the workers of the world could overthrow capitalism, with a capital C, in the great capitalist countries of Europe and Asia, great wars between the rival imperialisms were inevitable. And the working class must, under the circumstances, be conscripted into national conflict. The proletariat, united as they were and are by the class struggle, bonded together by the exploitation by capital, must stand outside the conflict that was the great wars between rival imperialisms. The proletariat must not sacrifice itself in the name of the nation, and certainly not in the name of democracy. That would be for James tantamount to succumbing to the logic of liberalism. That would be to follow up the Bolshevik path as advocated by Lenin, and even more felicitously by Trotsky, but to embark on a journey down the most dastardly of political roads, that taken by the Mensheviks, at least from the 1903 on. That would be to succumb to the abjection that is the bourgeoisie in its bourgeois in its mobilization of the state or the states to protect class interests. Against this stands James and Trotsky. Thinkers who intellectually shape the revolutionary content to the figure of agency, to commit obstinately in the face of death. Lenin's historic catastrophe, to the betrayal of both political bureaucratic variety, as employed by Stalin in his machinations to thwart Trotsky's ascension as Lenin's successor, and most importantly, of the ideological kind. That is, the complete refusal by Stalin to engage in politics that exceeded, to invoke that slogan most reviled by Trotsky and his loyalists, socialism in one country. Trotsky would, as we know, write about this, and the title of his critique leaves one with no doubt as to the extent of Stalin's infidelity to Lenin and to the promise of the Third International. Trotsky calls it the revolution betrayed. Nothing other than that. The revolution laid to waste in the name of a nationalist agenda. Stalin and those who, while they in general had no truck with him, remained sympathetic to Stalin's, shall we call it, pragmatism. To imagine revolution on a global scale, to expect proletariat the world over to join at some appointed and or propitious moment, the struggle against capitalism from Europe to Asia to the Caribbean and Africa, that was beyond the ideological capacity of Stalin, and those who could not envisage, except in the most fleeting and ghostly terms, the international proletariat rising up in one site, be that the European nation or colony in Africa, and simultaneously, but never simply spontaneously, in another. Obstinately, stubbornly, James deriving his political truth from that veritable heritage lineage that leads from Marx, Engels, to Lenin and Trotsky, dedicated his thinking to that most famous of Trotsky declaratives, permanent revolution. The revolution was a permanent commitment, or it was nothing. Under no circumstances could the revolution evolve into a petty assurance. That is, in the title of this presentation, a phrase borrowed from that famous Fabian, George Bernard Shaw, author of Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism. There can be no socialism without tears. Shaw is, as is his wont, mocking the domestication of socialism, the reduction of socialism, so obviously a matter of political oxygen for James, to nothing other than a trivial pursuit, for bored ladies, of course, and respectable ladies at that, for all they order. For all the fallacy of the Fabianism of George Bernard Shaw, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, the Fabians, so defined by their opposition to revolutionary socialism and their determined advocacy for a gradual transition to socialism. Half a century or so later, Stewart Hall, in two of the Caribbean coined the phrase, a memorable one at that, resonant with the spirit of James' critique of Shaw. Under very different conditions, Thatcherism to be precise, Hall committed himself to, quote, Marxism without guarantees. Between them, for Trotsky and James, there could be no revolution without a direct and, needless to say, brutal confrontation between the international proletariat and capital. Between them, James and Trotsky commanded, to borrow Adelson's concept, the future sense that would be distilled so poetically and crypto-apocalyptically in the 21st century by Slavoj Žižek. It is easier to imagine the end of the world, Žižek has intoned with glee and absolute seriousness in equal measure, than the end of capitalism. There was no mistaking the enemy for either Trotsky or James. Trotsky much more emphatically, because he did battle with Lenin on his very point from somewhere around 1905. Lenin would come to share Trotsky's position. Together they would institute internationalism as the founding condition of the Comintern. But Lenin arrived at this position only after Trotsky had shown himself to be resolute, utterly convinced, and immovable on this very point. For James, Lenin and Trotsky are the greatest political leaders in history. James, of course, has a special place in his pantheon with Toussaint Louverture. And what is salient in world revolution is how politically pedagogical the revolution, in all its phases, in those moments when the revolution is merely the desired outcome of the subjugated class, in the heat of battle, in preparation for a permanent dissolution of the state. This is it for James. It is, of course, entirely possible to label the political encounters between Lenin and Trotsky as an ongoing dialectic. That would be accurate. Such an understanding of how Lenin and Trotsky sparred intellectually would, however, cause us to miss the pedagogical wood of the political trees. Trotsky was instructing Lenin into the history of the future. That is, the history that the revolution would have to make in order to stand as a bona fide communist revolution. Its ideas come to nothing but narrow nationalism because of Lenin's death, political energy and integrity of the project sapped by Trotsky's exile. It took, as James says, until 1935 for the Third International to come to recognize the valuable and unarguable truth of Lenin and Trotsky's position. On this matter, James is scathing, I quote, "Not until 1935 did the Third International ever openly encourage any illusion about being able to stop war except by revolution." End of quote. The nation conscripts. The revolution enlists in the etymological sense of conscript. Conscript, to write with. That is, append the name of each proletarian one at a time, all together in the same act of writing. Writing with. The fidelity of self to the other. Writing with, in the sense offered here, as the act of contemporaneous signing. Appending the self's name with the other, making the self's name part of the other, making the self indistinguishable, a co-signatory, the proletariat, the glorious act of united, simultaneous penmanship, where self pledges itself to itself, that is, commits itself to its class, it takes its place in that class, dedicated to permanently revolt against class stratification and the various inequalities that flow from material experiences that divide one class from another. On this matter, Trotsky is clear, and he writes in the history of the Russian Revolution, "In a society seized by revolution, classes and conflict." End quote. Such an axiomatic Marxist analysis will not, of course, suffice for Trotsky. What he and James takes us from Trotsky, nowhere more so than beyond the boundary, anticipates that the proletariat will overthrow in a short interval age-old institutions, create new ones, and overthrow them again. Let us acknowledge it. We are face to face with the workings of permanent revolution. Overthrow, and then once more overthrow. And I quote again from Trotsky, "The dynamic of revolutionary events is directly determined by swift, intense, and passionate changes in the psychology of classes which have already formed themselves before the revolution. End quote. Here, we are left in no doubt as to either the creativity or the preparedness of the proletariat. It is already before itself, and perhaps without knowing this in itself, in tune with the dynamic of the revolution. It is ready to embrace the revolution, no matter at what speed it occurs, no matter that it has never encountered anything of this type before. The event, and this is what the Russian Revolution was above all, is made by those of the proletariat who are open to it. Or, dare we say, it is made by those who are not afraid of the dynamism, unpredictability, and sheer living force of the revolution. This is what the proletariat, whether it knows it or not, it cannot, after all, know the event in advance. This is what the proletariat has signed its name to. It is the event for which the proletariat has signed up. The nation compels itself into the ranks of the military. To join the revolution, however, is to answer a call by history to enlist with. It is to heed that call in the face of stubborn disapproval or violence of the state, or at least to, Dr. Jameson would argue, be done with politics as such entirely. That's because for Jameson, all politics begin with the state, and in order to conduct the revolution, my rendering, not Jameson's, all politics must be dispensed with summarily. Or to follow Adelson's line of argument about the peculiar force within that Eigensin, it is to ascribe to Eigensin both the power to emit and house, to keep safe, to allow the revolution to dwell within. If, without Adelson's phrasing, the revolution is not only a peculiarly autonomous force, but as that mode of revolutionary being that guards against, I'm quoting here, the capitalist expropriation of the senses on the one hand, and a sensate political economy of labor and power on the other. End quote. The proletariat's first, and it is possible to argue, only loyalty is to an internationalist revolution where the work is to, in James's terms, begin with Lenin while inclining ever more in the direction of Trotsky. That is, to understand, as James says that, and I quote, every individual country has its own weaknesses, theoretical and practical. Every country has its own distinctive traits to contribute. But international socialism has made an enormous stride forward, and in a number of concrete encounters, the millions of proletarians have welcomed themselves together in a decisive struggle against the bourgeoisie, a struggle for which the working class is immeasurably better prepared than at the time of the Paris Commune, the last great struggle. The historic particularity of every European nation notwithstanding, the promise of the revolution is nothing other than the stubborn promise of the revolution. It is a signing up for, appending the name of the self to Eigensin. No matter the adversity of the objective historical conditions, such as that moment, and as James puts it, and I quote, Lenin, one of the strongest men, nearly gave up in 1904 and contemplated going to America to study statistics. Here you go, Professor Lenin, or Ullman. The fit of discouragement passed, and he remained. The revolution can only be made by stubborn, obstinate beings. Or, as Adelson would have it, the revolution is that interruption into that eruption within, that disruption that emerges out of, and I quote, a mixture of concentrated affect, intractable will, stubborn mind, and political resistance stemming from some indeterminate but determined thing within one's own. End quote. James admired Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Trotsky for many things. Their commitment to communism above all else, needless to say. However, what every cook and government reveals to us by this detour through world evolution is that James shared with all these figures stubbornness. He shared with them an obstinate, unbreakable resolve. The revolution would make nothing of the nation state, or it was nothing. That is, it was not a revolution. After all, he did for the Soviet Union, state capitalism. The revolution would be led and won by the proletariat. The bourgeoisie, in whatever guise it presented itself, Bolshevik, as that class that claimed for itself the benefits of the French Revolution, These classes without historical necessity have to be defeated. And the capacity to conduct the revolution could only emerge from evidencing the revolution emanates from within. What's in every book can govern, we are sure of it. It is inscribed into every line of C.L.R. James's face. It punctuates pretty much his every sentence. It is not that the revolution cannot be known. It is rather that the revolution as such does not need to be known because it, to phrase this in a Heideggerian register, already dwells within. What is more, the revolution is itself constitutive of evidencing. It has long since been stubbornly, obstinately, resolutely, patiently, impatiently, restlessly, carelessly waiting for its moment. That moment known only to it. It has taken up residence within. To know the revolution, then, is entirely explicable. After all, to know the revolution would be to know always, infallibly, that which is within. Thank you.
So that's the second question for me is he a figure of the 20th century, a kind of romantic, revolutionary figure along with Lenin, Trotsky, and is that a type of public political intellectual that is no longer relevant presence in our world? So those are just ideas to try to respond or come up with your own responses to the work.
open it up for discussion. If you want to ask questions or make comments, let's do that.
Stuart Hall's name came up briefly in the film, and I wondered what either of you might have to say about personal interactions or political or intellectual affinities between James and I suppose Hall, but I'm thinking even more curious about Raymond Williams.
They take two distinctly different paths. Stuart becomes, despite himself, an institutional man. James he's an autodidact. The man has completely educated himself, read voraciously. James never dabbled. He's all about depth. But Hall, I think, leaves behind institution, not in the sense that they brick and mortar, but in the sense, and it's cultural studies and its legacy. It's the renovation of Marxism in the second half of the 20th century. It's a series of scholars institutionally trained by Stuart from Birmingham on. And there's several generations of them. They're now people at least in their 60s, probably Paul Willis has got to be in his 70s, close to that. Stuart died, 4 years ago, when he was 82 maybe? Right, so you can see Hall has left a visible institutional legacy. With James, what you had was fratricide, people struggling over the bits. Because, and Anna knows more about this than I do, but the James Archive in all these different places. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to talk about and don't want to talk about the documentary, because it's just these usual suspects. And there's something incredibly derivative for me, and that's the polite word. I'm not using the term I want to, but this is why I opened with the quote from Heidegger. The disciples are infinitely less interesting than the master. And one can disagree with Paul Gilroy, or you can take issue with Michael Denny. But there is no doubt, and Patiba Parma, or Hector Jaw, people in Australia, Alfred Probert, or Angela McRobin. But you cannot say the following, that they have not been well and assiduously trained by Stuart, or at least in that lineage. And I think that's the difference. What James has bred is a kind of cult of personality, and I'm not saying there aren't people who don't really worship at the altar of Stuart, or there are reasons to do so. But with Paul, there was Paul eschewed that. It was never part of Stuart's makeup. So I would say the significant difference is what they leave us to work with. And in some ways, James is the more prolific, because Stuart doesn't ever really write a book. It's only Marxism without the Thatcherite book, The Hard Road to Renewal, the title taken from Grimshaw. That's a collection of essays. But Stuart's institutional legacy is just, it's international, for one, and it's ongoing. If you think that Stuart was only at Birmingham between 1969 and 1979, what he has brought forth, the New Testament about this, is something remarkable. But, you look at James's work, and it's varied, it's ambitious, it's all over the place. One would be hard-pressed to put all Stuart's things together because he wrote so sporadically. In many ways, they're bonded to them. They're both activists, and they see the need to intervene in the moment. But I say this with deep caution, and now remember, the book about both of them, we're both in figure, kind of helps. But James is the more recognizable intellectual in a conventional sense. Stewart takes the path less traveled. You know, Stewart puts a PhD because 1956 happens. And he says, no, I have to intervene here. From high school teacher to Raymond Williams' assistant, to Dick Harvard's assistant, to running back to the New Left Review, to leading the New Left Review, saying, you know, E.P. Thompson and Perry Anderson want to fight, please, go ahead, gentlemen. Right? So Hall's abstraction moment. He leaves Birmingham and he says, I can't do this anymore. Right? And he goes to the Open University. So I would say that they offer different prospects for thinking. I mean, the James Earls is substantial. I mean, there's, you know, it's all thrilling stuff when you get to recognize his voice. Right? And, you know, I feel at a certain moment, like, okay, now I'm done. You know, but you come back to it and you realize the kind of care with which he dealt with it. And that's equally true of Stewart. Stewart, if James comes to Marx and Trotsky, Stewart comes to Marx and Grimshaw. And it's those detours that seem to me interesting. But they offer us different things, and I don't compare them in the sense of one is better than the other. They offer us different modes of thinking.
There is a long, actually, interview between Paul and James. I actually don't remember now whether any of the clips in this film are from that. I think so. So it's actually a kind of interesting document to see how they relate to each other. Another issue for James about Paul was James's perception of Paul was closer to the Soviet Union than he would like. I mean, I think it's hard for us now to understand quite how ferocious that battle was between Marxists who, between people who were Marxists but did not want to be identified with the Soviet Union. And that was a kind of life and death battle in the 30s for James and 40s. And, you know, many intellectuals, certainly in England, like Paul and like Raymond Williams and E.P. Thompson, were CPers. They did sign up for the Soviet Union model often until 56 or the invasion of Czechoslovakia, and then they left. So James was always very nervous around like that. He felt that he thought in particular ways that we really gave him to this. Somebody with that?
And then that
Could both of you address a little bit the question of watershed movements in terms of that second and third international? Because what you were just speaking about in how various tendencies, for lack of a better term here, I'll use the old-fashioned word, in terms of Marxist thought and thoughts and thought in terms of colonialism are animating much of this discussion, whether it's in the film or in your remarks. So I'm thinking about something like Kronstadt. So 56 in Hungary is salient for a generation in the UK, and certainly it may be less salient in France than it should have been for the CP at that point. There are all these watershed moments that we know of in the earlier 20th century for people who are having these battles. So whether we're talking about Spartacus or whether we're talking about Kronstadt, I'm curious about your own take about how James starts judging others in terms of those watershed moments.
Well, James was always interested in watershed moments because what they threw up, which didn't necessarily have to be, I mean, it could have been, as it alludes to at the end of the film, black unrest in inner city London. I mean, those moments were when he was especially interested in what was being crystallized there. and what kinds of political organization might emerge in those moments of conflict and crisis. That was something you always had something on. And again, it led me to think, about these young people who drive the film in some way. What is it? I mean, the Me Too movement, for example, would be something. In fact, James would be very interested in. And again, it's another of my major criticisms of this film is the whole question of gender, which was absolutely central to how James thought from Minty Alley onwards, from his early short stories to his novel. Exactly. Right up until his essays in the 80s about Alice Walker and South Shanghai. It was bizarre to me to see all those young women sitting at the feet of all these older guys as if they were sort of dispensing words of wisdom. Whereas, he would have wanted to know what were the experiences of these young people, where did they think they were going as a movement. So that's just my response to your question. I mean, his interest always was in what we might retrospectively see as watershed moments. He was always on the lookout for something breaking out that showed relationships and structures and the ways in which things were changing. So James always had his eye on those things.
I just a simple question. I just wonder what either of you know about the making of the film, the people who made it, the kinds of intentions they may have had. They're actually rather difficult to read. There's an evenness in it. I mean, I think what you point out, that Adam was a great comment, that one is curious about these young people, so if they somehow drive this thing or not, but I just wonder if you know, and because I'm thinking, I mean, when you were here too, but it's a constraining contrast of, for instance, John Hopkins' film on Stewart. I mean,
right.
Where you
know it's
very directed
yes.
sort of vision of what this intellectual is about. And here it's really rather vague to me because there are some parts that come out very clearly. Nelson. So you learn
Yes.
about how to feel. Right. And then you think, oh, well, we get the same thing about Horace Fango. So it's just odd. I can't sort of, and at the beginning it says something about some sort of a collective.
Yes.
So I don't know anything you can say or that you really know.
I don't know much, except that it was not directed in any conventional way. There's not a single person directing it, and that was in the spirit of every book and government. That it is a collective enterprise that brings together people to work in a kind of egalitarian way to explore, but that's some downsides are the unevenness, the fact that we don't quite know what started this. Again, I'm thinking, why would a group of young people, and they did a huge amount of research. I mean, that's impressive. The archival research, the files that the police had on James. That was great. They had fantastic archive footage, but I didn't understand what it was all about. Okay, maybe you want to assemble all that as theologians, but why?
And why now?
Yes, right. Why now? Exactly.
I mean, this is why I am uncomfortable when you say, it's great that these young people know all this stuff, but they always seem to me, there seemed to be a certain timidness
Yes,
about the interrogation.
Yes,
It was
yes,
like they were
yes.
even literally at the feet of
exactly.
the master. And it's just like, what is going on
Yes.
here? I mean, that's why I recoiled kind of like, oh my God, this just feels like what I know. This is a certain James faction got hold of these people, and you know which faction it is. And they this was boot camp. And I mean, the road to hell was paved with good Jamesian intentions.
So no, I can't.
I mean, I don't think the line, the Jamesian line is difficult to pick up. What I'm interested in is the mechanics, how did this come about? Who sponsored it? Because it's not these people, because you can see that they're scripted, right? They found certain moments in James that seemed to me iconographic. Those are the ways you go.
Exactly, and they have very careful questions and so on. But yeah, I really did. I found that.
That's why Nelson stands out, because there's nothing controversial about Nelson, right? There's nothing. It's Nello doing what Nello does. He's sort of like sponging on other people. Yes. So it's there's the moment where he's being taken there by Constantine. He's welcomed, and it's also the moment that he gets an introduction into British politics and culture. He meets Neville Cardus, he joins the Independent Labour Party, he gets access to the Trotskyists. From there that he writes both World Revolution and he will write, the Black Jacobins. So Nelson is an entirely uncontroversial moment, which is why Nelson shines so brightly. But they have a guy you don't know talking about Nelson. My question is, where the hell's Verb Richards? Right? I mean, Verb gets it. Verb's biography, you don't know who Verb Richards is, that's because you're American, and I don't blame you. Well, I kind of blame you, but Verb is the Prince of Batsmen. And Verb's biography, his autobiography, is dedicated to James among them. And Verb gets him. Verb understands what he, and if you're going to have Mike Brearley, you've got to have Clive Lloyd. I mean, they just, gaps there that it's just, that's why I think it's a party line. From Darkest to Bobby, to Scott, to Kent. What is it? There are more questions than answers. I don't want to know the answers.
It's just a thought, but as you were talking about the film there, one of the things that came to mind was that, so I teach a Caribbean history course, and although I'm very, I'm thinking that I would like to use this film in the course, the students would need to know a whole lot more in order to understand some of the context here, and so even, they throw out Trotsky like a lot of people would just know. As a matter of fact, who Trotsky is. So, that's one piece of it. The other piece, too, is that they don't bring in some of his critics so that you get a sense of what, these larger debates were. So as important as Black Jacobins is, and I have used that in the course, they're Haitian scholars. Michel Montreuil had a very important critique of Black Jacobins. And talking about his appreciation of British literature and all of that too. Well, there are literary scholars who also put that in conversation in other ways that are also critical. And so that's how you do end up with a hagiography, rather than something where he is in debate and conversation with even his contemporaries.
And I mean, his childhood friend is one of those people, George Padmore. Because Padmore and James, they may have liked each other and worked together, but they had serious disagreement. And so we just want to start with Padmore, and James was wrong about Sobers, and he had this crazy. Gary Sobers he's the greatest all-rounder of the world. Maybe he's the greatest batsman, he's the greatest cricketer of the world. But Sobers had serious issues. He drank too much, he gambled, and he was frequently out the night before. And James thought he could sort of spin a puritanical yarn to Sobers. And Sobers is like, dude, not good. Gary marched to the beat of his own drum. So, if you see the sanitized Sobers, you think this is all just kumbaya. There were serious conflicts in that piece. And what I think the opportunity missed is to talk about a really tragic figure, like Walton St. Hill. The kind of pathos around him, what he doesn't accomplish. The ways in which James and Salma get together and, movement around domestic work for women. Those silences are just, and this is why I do think that a certain camp puts us together, and well, my first response is, caution.
Well, once they've committed themselves somehow to a narrative of the whole, I mean, it's clearly chosen and ordered and selected, then there's nothing else, and it's already 2 hours. I mean, in a sense, different pieces have to be broken down and really interrogated, because they are so much more complex, and there are so many more debates around every aspect of James's legacy, his work, written work, and political activist work. And unfortunately, that's not at all in this film. And as you say, as an introduction, it's also a problem, because he might give us an overview, but it takes for granted an awful lot.
And the fact that you have Calypso, and James is likely to listen to Bach as he was to Calypso. I mean, there's that kind of, this is Africana, this is Sparrow, right? Sparrow comes to life. And James likes Sparrow. But this is where, your notion of he's, and this is that wonderful line beyond the boundary. Thackeray, not Marx, bears the heaviest responsibility. What does that mean to be so fully immersed, invested in, and participatory, participating in modernity? James thrived on that. And then you hear, Scott McLean say, 6'3", guy with a British accent, and James has a British accent, and I'm a nice guy. Just that kind of things that are missed and irritated you see at the second.
I think I would have to be forced to show that to you. I found it depressing, and I think it's even more depressing to think that could have been programmatic. Your statement that it's the group that does this in the food camp, that's even worse. That's even worse. Because on the one hand, I see the type drawn to the type, I want to see it. And trying to temper my own, I'm not going to romanticize, because sometimes you can fall into that thinking, especially, and there were several times in the film where you can hear, saying to the colleague, we're going to see the American Revolution. We're going to see that sort of forward-looking, sort of idea that's embedded in that stubbornness, that focus. And so there's something attractive in that, especially since in parts of the film you can see there was an identifiable group of us as an audience. Sort of identifiable sort of group of young people. And I try to, I want to be able to think, where is that? Why is it so difficult to address, the thinking when we've come out of these elections, thinking about what is the working class to us today? Can I even use that word?
Can I
use that word? So I came trying to think of all of those things, and so the juxtaposition between you're still hearing the line of yes, the revolution will come, things like that, the daringness of utopian thought, right? On the one hand, but then seeing the young people carry out an assignment that they don't know, it was hard to see that. It was just hard to see that. I felt they were at a disservice. And the ability for him to communicate with those constituencies done at a disservice. So I found it downright impressive.
Well, I thought their presence for me was what was interesting about the film, because the rest of it, I would argue, I could have endless arguments with the choice of people, the particular lines, ways in which they interpreted James, but I thought, well, who are these people? What does it all mean to these people? I mean, the fact that we're not given any indication. I mean, I like to think that they weren't conscripted to do this. I mean, if it were were a collaborative effort. I think it would be quite hard. It doesn't have a director. So I don't quite see it in such a sort of stark terms, but there is still so much left unresolved.
And it's not the fact that young people didn't get, that's not my point. It's that if you were going to mentor the young people to go out and do something like this, it has to be on their own terms.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Not,
Yes.
And they have to know James. I mean, they have to sort of, they have to be educated in James. The reason I gave the presentation is I couldn't deal with the movie. I was like, I couldn't.
I was wondering.
And I couldn't watch it all at once. I literally watched it in 3 or 4 parts. Like I cannot take this. I see darkness one more time, I'll do myself in, right? But the reason I turned to World Revolution is because it's one of these major works that's almost always ignored. But the other thing is, it's the only usable James text in our moment, and here's why. Because in the moment when we're talking about multitude and assembly, necropolitics, biopolitics, this is an obstinate, stubborn piece of work. It believes inveterately in the possibility of proletarian revolution. And then and this is why I completely sympathize with you. I find myself utterly insignificant. Can we still talk about a proletariat? And that's the question. What has our technological age made possible? And is Marxism going to go the way of multitude, where we have other names for it, without addressing fundamental material inequality? And so that's where I find James most resonant. And I find myself reading this paper and thinking, my God, I'm anachronistic. Right? This is a 1940s paper. This is not a 2018 paper. And yet, those questions about material inequity, the possibility of a world that can be made differently. I mean, I think James, to the very end, believed in that. He believed in that, which is why he could celebrate almost the coming of the end of the Soviet Union, which is why he would, why he participated in support for solidarity in Poland. I mean, those things for him, as you would say, the markings of what might be, the small little moments. We don't have to give up revolution.
And neither they can be achievable, because what Jimmy was saying about the critiques that are there only lend more credence to the effort. Right?
Can I just add one more thing too? I would say the other book that I think is important that doesn't get acknowledged enough is the book on Nkrumah, because it's such an important critique of what Nkrumah was attempting to do. And there's been Nkrumah again had very big ideas also, and I think there's been an effort on the parts of some people to more sort of romanticize some of the things Nkrumah attempted to do without fully engaging sort of the lack of small d democracy in what had happened. And so I think there's an important sort of political or set of political takeaways from that book as well that I think all of us should, particularly in this moment, want to re-engage. Because the point is, part of the point about these, the cults around political figures, we're definitely living in a moment of that. So it's still highly relevant.
James was deeply suspicious about democracy with this one. For him, democracy was sorry.
So this is probably an improper question, but I would like a little more context about what are the stakes behind owning James, the way this film is. Like I just is coming out of a place of ignorance. And why is this figure particularly open to this kind of appropriation that perhaps other Fanon may not be, or I don't know, Gandhi, or if you think about any kind of post-colonial figures, just to.
I don't know, but that, I mean, that certainly was the reason that I decided after James's death that I was retiring, that I didn't want to live in this world of intrigue and sectarianism, as you said, and it was, I felt very strongly that was a problem. I can't explain why it's the case. Do you have any ideas, Grant?
I think James was, I'm going to offer a very simple thing. James was a world started. You think of the people in Ghana, Amy Garvey, Nkrumah, Kenyatta, before they became modern. But, you know, and then you, so for a certain leftist, third world, Pan-Africans, that's an important projection. There's Padmore. James was invited to the opening ceremonies in Accra in 1957. There's that. So just politically, there's a man who's met Trotsky. I mean, you think of that. So he's a world historical figure in political terms. In intellectual terms, again, there's Trotsky. There's a man who may be the last generation of sort of world scholars in Farsi of the 19th century, early 20th century, who come into being, educated in a particular way. Professor Atching can tell us more, right? I mean, like he went to QRC. You went to QRC, you went to QRC. It's like, if I say something from Sri Lanka, if I asked you where you go to school, I say, do you go to Royal or St. Thomas? That's the question that comes up. Yes, it's that kind of standing. Right? So, intellectually, he's got this vast corpus. And he doesn't manage it very well, as Anna knows. There's stuff all over the place. Then, there's Cricket. When you think of whom he grew up with, and you think of his ability to, write about W.G. Grace in the middle of the 19th century, 100 years later, in such a way. So, and he is the key figure, as someone says, in bringing about Frank Worrell's captaincy. Frank Worrell was born in Barbados, but he's considered too black to play for Barbados, certainly too black to captain Barbados. He moves to Jamaica. It's a more accepting society. And James sees this. And he says, Worrell has to be respected. So you think that Worrell dies young. Worrell was 47.
Yeah.
He was really young when he died. But James nurtured that generation, the three W's. Frank Worrell, Everton Weeks, and Clyde Walker. It's what the highways are called in Barbados, the three W's. So you think in a Caribbean location, and then you think of James as internationalism. A man who contemplated all the big questions. That kind of autodidactic education. You're dealing with a world historical figure. And so what these folks want is a bit of a gloss.
In a nutshell.
That's my argument, and I should be more attentive about it, but I do think it's a world historical figure, and we want a piece of that. And Anna and I know this personally because we lived in various moments, but in the C.L.R. James Institute. We saw these things being compiled and protected. The prophylaxis of greatness, if you want.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was James admired American culture, and I didn't understand why. How did that work? Being so steeped and so knowledgeable about American culture and how it came about. And he mentions
American civilization.
But nobody talked about it once. He wrote a massive manuscript in 1950, which was his really trying to come to terms with what America, and half of the manuscript is about Hollywood movies.
Right.
And there's a huge chapter on women. There's also a long chapter on Walt Whitman. I mean, Whitman was the counterpart to Melville. So, yeah, all of these questions, I mean, you're right. I mean, none of these questions were actually addressed in any way. So you would have no idea what it was that he was trying to get his head around about America, which was so much more complex than politics or the capital P. It was the cultural basis of American society.
Yeah, the answer is quite simple. Well, James was fascinated by a country which could wrap itself in the popular without apologies. That was it. That's a true story about, James did this on Long Island. He says, like, I'm going to boycott this film in the morning, I'm going to go out and protest, and I'm going to sneak in the afternoon. I mean, he really was fascinated by the popular. And that's what Beyond the Boundary is. That's what it is, a recognition of the force of the popular. James, Raymond Williams, E.P. Thompson, Richard Hubbard, these are the founders of cultural studies in the following way. The most reductive, simplistic. Take the popular seriously. It's where the people are. That was it. This was a country that's unapologetic about its desire for the popular. James, he didn't, the other stuff he could figure out, but the popular, that really inspired him.
He listened to radio shows,
Yes,
comics.
that's right.
The wake of the collapse of communist country, I wonder what James saw and the seeming triumph of capitalism. I wonder what he saw as the coming American Revolution of that time. I mean, did he imagine that the proletariat was going to rise up? America was going to rise up and overthrow capitalism?
That's Bobby Hill saying that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Bobby Hill saying that.
Oh.
James would never, ever.
That's Bobby Hill calling himself Mr. Hill? Mr. Robert?
Calling a liberal too, right? A good liberal.
Yeah, I know, that's Ken still calls him a libertarian. Please don't. I think, take Professor Action seriously.
A libertarian socialist.
No,
No, I mean, you have to go to the work. I mean, the commentators get in the way of us really engaging with what James was about. I also noticed that, I have an interest in this, I also noticed on everyone's desk special delivery, edited, the letters I edited between James and his second wife, whom he glimpsed briefly, she was a light woman, that he was involved with and married throughout his time in the U.S. And he wrote this amazing body of letters to her, where everything comes out. I mean, the struggle of having to operate on the ground, the thrill of going to Hollywood movies several times a day, his love for her. I mean, it's really an extraordinary account of America and what effect it's having on your values.
the fact that he has a son who's
Yes.
homeless in L.A. Now, I mean, Nobby has got to be 74. If he's still alive, he's a homeless. James's only child is homeless, was a homeless person in L.A. He wouldn't go near his mother, he wouldn't have nothing. Constance would just like go and watch him from a distance. I mean, there's that kind of pathos and the cost of being a revolutionary. And the women who bore it,
I just have a question, if Grant, maybe it's a bit too specific, but I'm curious about your reference to Heidegger. So, does your kind of interpretation of Heidegger affect your work with James, or is this something that came out?
Sorry, what was the question?
Just asking that as a reference to Heidegger.
we are the sum total of our lives. And Heidegger allowed me to think about certain notions of change, and particularly the notion of within, the revolution within. Because I think it's not just change's obstinacy, it's this deep, deeply felt and profoundly located sense of the possibility of a revolution. And so that notion of dwelling allows me to build or includes work about obstinacy. Again, this was for me this was my own prophylaxis against having to talk about it.
Okay, well, let's